As an estate planning lawyer, I frequently use living trusts for clients, so it's important to know exactly what a living trust is. First, it's completely different than a last will and a testament. A will is a document that speaks for you after your death, and it's used to pass on your assets to your heirs. A will also has to pass through a court in a process called probate. Now, the probate process can be time-consuming, costly to your heirs, and it's not private. Now, a living trust, though, is different. It's a legal agreement that you create while you're living, and into which you transfer ownership of your property and assets with specific rules on exactly how you want your assets managed and controlled. Now, this ownership of property, it's an important concept to understand when we're talking about living trusts. Now, normally, when people own property or assets, and here I'm talking about houses, cars, bank accounts, and even personal belongings, they own them in their own personal names, or even in joint names with their spouse. But with a living trust, we transfer our property out of our name, and then we transfer ownership into the trust that we create. We'll talk about that process a little bit more in a minute. But for now, let's first talk about the parties involved when you create a living trust. First, there's the grantor. The grantor it's just a fancy name for the person creating the trust. So if you decide to use a living trust in your estate plan, you're going to be known as the grantor, and you set all the rules about the trust. Then there's the trustee. This is the person whom you name to be in charge of the assets that you put into the trust. The trustee also has to follow the rules that you've set. Finally, the people who benefit from your trust, they're known as beneficiaries. Now, what's neat about certain types of living trusts that we use for planning your estate is that you can oftentimes hold all of these roles. So you can be the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. So that while you're living and healthy, you can maintain control over all your assets. But then when you die, you can have named a successor trustee who can take over for you and make sure your assets keep being managed for your future beneficiaries, such as your kids or your grandkids. Now, I mentioned earlier that a trust agreement is a way to own your property. So to have an effective living trust that is doing what it should be doing for planning purposes, it's important that your trust be funded. And this is where a lot of lawyers who aren't really estate planning lawyers kind of mess it up. They fail to transfer your property to your trustee. Now, this process of making the transfer is called funding the trust. When we fund the trust, we literally retitle your assets from you to your trustee of the trust. Now, there are many advantages to using a living trust as part of your estate plan. Living trusts are great for couples who have minor children who can't own assets or property in their own name. Living trusts are also great because they allow you to avoid that whole probate court system. Remember I mentioned that you can name a successor trustee to take over the management of your trust when you die, or even when you become incapacitated? Well, the beauty of the living trust arrangement is that when those things happen, there's a seamless transfer of control over to the new trustee without a probate court having to become involved. Now, living trusts are also great for couples in second marriages because the trust can allow you to make provisions for your kids from a first marriage so that they don't become completely disinherited if you die before your second spouse. Finally, living trusts are also useful to help us minimize inheritance taxes so you can save your heirs more of your hard-earned life savings. I hope you've found the information in this short video about living trusts to be valuable. Living trusts really are a great estate planning tool, but let's face it, they aren't for every single situation. So we've created this great online quiz to help you see if a living trust might be suitable for your estate planning needs. You can find the quiz right here on our website, or you can visit thelivingtrustquiz.com to take the test. Once you've taken the Living Trust quiz, if you'd like to learn more about trusts and whether you could benefit from one, go ahead and schedule your family legal planning session with us today. and begin getting your estate plan and financial affairs in order.